She walked down the crowded street with her stomach growling louder than the city noise around her. Every step felt heavier than the last, not just because her shoes were worn and hurting, but because the weight of hunger made her limbs feel like lead. She had been searching for something to eat all day, trying to stretch the few coins she had left. But even the small bakeries and street vendors seemed too expensive for her empty pockets. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the buildings, and the thought of another night going to bed without food made her chest tighten. Her eyes scanned the street, and finally, she spotted a small restaurant tucked between two taller buildings. The smell of roasted meat and warm bread drifted out the door and made her stomach rumble even more. She paused for a moment, hesitating. She knew this might be a long shot, but she had to try. She took a deep breath, smoothed down her worn jacket, and pushed open the door. The bell above jingled softly, and a few heads turned to look at her. She smiled nervously and walked up to the counter. The manager was busy wiping down the counter, talking to a couple of staff members, and clearly didn't expect anyone to ask him what she was about to say. She swallowed hard and said, "Excuse me, sir, I don't have money for a meal, but could I perform for one? I can play the piano." Her voice wavered slightly, a mixture of hope and fear. The manager blinked, clearly caught off guard. He looked at her as if she had said something strange. A few customers at the tables turned their heads, curious. A couple of them chuckled quietly, thinking it was a joke. The young woman tried to keep her face calm, even though her heart was pounding. She added, "I won't take long. I just want to play for a few minutes, please." The manager laughed, shaking his head. "You want to perform for a meal? Are you serious?" She nodded, biting her lip. "Yes, I'm serious. I don't want to steal anything. I just need a meal, please." The room fell a little quieter. The manager's laughter faded into a hesitant smile, though there was still a glint of disbelief in his eyes. The customers who had been whispering to each other now leaned back, some still smiling, some curious, but no one expected much. Most thought she would play a little and maybe embarrass herself and then leave empty-handed. She glanced around nervously, feeling the eyes on her. She could feel their skepticism, but she reminded herself that she had nothing to lose. She walked slowly toward the small stage area where the piano sat. It wasn't a grand concert hall, but it would do. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, revealing the keys that had been her companions for years. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar comfort of the piano under her fingers. The first note she played was soft, almost hesitant, but it caught the attention of everyone in the room. A murmur passed through the diners. The manager paused in his movements, unsure of what to do next. The young woman felt a wave of nervous energy wash over her, but she focused, letting the music flow from her heart rather than her mind. Slowly, her fingers moved across the keys with a quiet confidence that seemed to surprise even her. The notes were clear, warm, and full of emotion. She closed her eyes for a moment, losing herself in the music. The room felt different now. The laughter and whispers faded into silence as people turned their attention fully to her. Even the manager, who had been skeptical a moment ago, watched with a mixture of amazement and curiosity. Her music told a story without words. It spoke of longing and hope, of struggles and small joys. She poured all of her feelings into each chord, each note vibrating through the air, reaching into the hearts of the listeners. The customers who had initially doubted her now sat up straighter, leaning forward in their chairs, drawn into the unexpected beauty of her performance. For her, it was more than just playing for a meal. It was a way to be seen, a way to be heard. Every day had been a struggle, and moments like this reminded her of the life she had dreamed of but never thought possible. She remembered the countless hours spent practicing in small empty rooms, teaching herself to play by ear, learning songs from old recordings she could barely afford. And now here she was, offering a piece of that world to complete strangers in exchange for a simple meal. She noticed a few people quietly recording her on their phones, and she smiled gently. It didn't matter. What mattered was the connection she was making, the surprise and delight she could see in their eyes. She finished the first piece and paused, letting the last note linger in the air. There was a brief silence, almost as if the room itself was holding its breath, and then the manager clapped softly, as if realizing that she might actually be something special. Others followed, some hesitantly at first, then with genuine enthusiasm. The young woman opened her eyes and met the manager's gaze, her own eyes shining with hope. "Would you like another piece?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and newfound respect. She nodded, smiling shyly, As she continued to play, she felt the tension in her body begin to ease. The room no longer seemed intimidating. The warmth of the music created a bridge between her and the people around her. For the first time that day, she felt a sense of belonging, even if just for a few moments. The food she had hoped for no longer seemed like the only reward. She realized that sharing her music, even in such a small setting, gave her a different kind of satisfaction, one that went beyond hunger. Every note, every melody was a small victory over the hardships she had faced. She could feel the energy in the room shift with each chord, and it filled her with a quiet pride she hadn't felt in a long time. As the last few customers finished their meals and left, a few stayed behind, talking quietly among themselves about the young woman who had turned a simple restaurant into a place of unexpected beauty. The manager approached her once again, this time with a serious expression. He offered her a warm meal, and she accepted with a heartfelt smile, feeling a deep gratitude that went beyond words. Sitting down with her plate of food, she reflected on the day. What had started as desperation had turned into something almost magical. She had risked rejection, embarrassment, and ridicule, but by daring to ask and offering her talent, she had found a small moment of triumph. The music she played had not only fed her body, but had nourished something deeper within her, a sense of purpose, a reminder that even in the hardest times there was a place for her gift in the world. She finished her meal slowly, savoring each bite, but her mind was already thinking about the next time she could play, the next opportunity to share her music. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but tonight had shown her that courage, even in its smallest form, could open doors she never imagined. And as she stood up to leave, the manager gave her a nod of encouragement, silently acknowledging the spark of talent and determination he had witnessed. She stepped back onto the street, feeling lighter than when she had entered, carrying not just the fullness of a meal, but the quiet certainty that she had taken the first step toward something greater. The next day she woke up early, her body still carrying the warmth of the meal she had earned the night before. Hunger had not completely disappeared, but the memory of the restaurant and the people's surprise at her music stayed with her, giving her a quiet strength. She walked through the streets, her worn shoes tapping softly on the pavement. The city had a rhythm, a pulse that seemed to match the beat of her own heart, and she couldn't help but smile at the thought that her music could connect with strangers in such a short time. She returned to the restaurant, hoping that the manager would recognize her and allow her to play again. As she approached the door, she saw a few familiar faces from the night before, people who had stayed to watch her play. Some smiled and waved as she stepped inside. The manager, who had been arranging the tables, paused and looked at her, a mixture of surprise and curiosity in his eyes. "Back again?" he asked, a small smile forming on his lips. She nodded, her voice steady but polite. "I was hoping I could play again today. I know it's asking a lot, but I just want a chance to share more music." The manager studied her for a moment. There was something in her eyes, a determination he hadn't noticed the night before. Finally, he nodded. "All right, you can play, but just for a little while, okay?" She thanked him softly and moved toward the piano. As she lifted the lid, she felt the same mix of nerves and excitement. The keys looked the same, yet everything felt different now. She wasn't just asking for a meal, she was offering a piece of herself again. The customers watched with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. Some remembered her from yesterday, others were new, and a few still carried a quiet doubt in their eyes. She began to play, her fingers gliding over the keys with a confidence that grew with each note. The room, once filled with chatter and laughter, now fell silent. The music flowed naturally, and she allowed herself to be fully present in the moment. Each note carried emotion, telling a story of struggle, hope, and determination. The customers were drawn in, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes, letting the melody fill the space between them. The manager watched closely, clearly impressed by the skill and depth of her playing. He had expected a simple performance, something to pass the time, but what he heard was far more than that. The young woman played with a kind of honesty that made it impossible not to feel connected to her story. She wasn't just playing music. She was communicating her life, her struggles, and her dreams in a language everyone could understand. As she continued, a small crowd began to gather. Word had spread quickly about the girl who had played for a meal. People were curious, wanting to see the talent that had amazed the restaurant the night before. The young woman noticed the growing attention but remained focused on the music. She didn't play to impress. She played to express. Each chord, each melody, carried a part of her heart, and the listeners could feel it. A few skeptical customers who had initially thought she might fail now found themselves captivated. Their eyes widened in surprise, and some exchanged whispered comments about how someone so young and seemingly unremarkable could play with such depth and skill. The manager, standing near the counter, shook his head slightly, still amazed at what was happening before him. He had seen many performers in his time, but there was something uniquely special about her. The young woman noticed a little boy at one of the tables, sitting with his parents. He watched her with wide eyes, completely still, as if he couldn't believe the music coming from the piano. She smiled gently at him, and he smiled back, his parents following suit. The simple interaction reminded her why she loved to play. Music had the power to connect people, to touch hearts in ways words could never reach. And here, in this small restaurant, she was able to share that magic with strangers who had no idea what was about to happen. As she played her final piece for the day, the room erupted in applause. The manager approached her once more, his expression a mix of admiration and respect. "You didn't just play music," he said softly. "You told a story, and it was beautiful." She smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond the food she had received. The recognition mattered, but what mattered more was the connection she had created. She felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long while. The customers who had doubted her now nodded, smiled, or whispered compliments to each other. Some even approached her, asking where she had learned to play, what inspired her, and when she might return. The young woman realized that her talent was more than a means to get by. It was a gift that could bring people together, lift spirits, and transform ordinary moments into something extraordinary. She began to feel a quiet determination to continue sharing her music, not just for herself, but for anyone who might need to hear it. She understood that her journey would not be easy, but the small victories like today made every struggle worth it. As the restaurant quieted down and the crowd dispersed, she took a moment to thank the manager. He offered her another meal, and she accepted graciously. Sitting down, she thought about how far she had come in such a short time. What had started as a desperate plea for food had turned into an opportunity to share her heart with the world. She realized that sometimes taking a risk, even when it seemed foolish, could lead to unexpected and wonderful outcomes. After finishing her meal, she packed her few belongings and stepped back into the street. The city was alive with sounds and movement, but she felt different now. There was a lightness in her step, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more hungry days and difficult nights. But she also knew that her music could carry her through. She had seen how it could touch hearts, change perspectives, and create moments of beauty in an ordinary world. Walking down the street, she thought about the people she had met, the smiles, the applause, and the sense of connection that music had given her. It wasn't just about the meals anymore. It was about being heard, about sharing a part of herself that was real and meaningful. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there were more doors to open, more opportunities to play, and more hearts to reach. And with that thought, she felt a quiet excitement, ready to face whatever came next, carrying her music and her courage with her into the unknown. A few days later, she returned to the restaurant, carrying with her the small bundle of belongings she had grown accustomed to taking everywhere. The streets were familiar now, the city noises blending into a rhythm she could almost dance to. She had thought about the restaurant every day since her last performance, replaying the smiles, the applause, and the quiet nods of recognition she had received. The thought of going back filled her with a nervous excitement she had not felt in a long time. As she stepped inside, she noticed the same warm light, the same hum of conversation, and a few faces that seemed to recognize her immediately. Some of the customers from previous days were already seated, quietly observing her as she made her way to the piano. The manager, polishing a glass behind the counter, looked up and gave her a nod. This time there was no skepticism in his eyes, only a kind of quiet curiosity and an unspoken respect. "Good to see you again," he said softly, motioning toward the piano. "Go ahead, play." She thanked him and settled at the bench, feeling the familiar weight of the piano keys beneath her fingers. She took a deep breath, feeling the nerves start to settle into a focused calm. She remembered the first time she had asked to play here, the laughter and doubt, and now she realized how far she had come. This place, this piano, and the people watching her were becoming part of her story. She started with a gentle melody, soft and inviting. The room grew quiet almost instantly, the chatter fading as everyone turned their attention toward her. The music began to fill the air, weaving through the space and wrapping itself around each person present. She felt the notes move through her, each one carrying her emotions and thoughts, unspoken but understood by anyone who would listen. The customers leaned forward, some with wide eyes, others with their heads slightly tilted, absorbing every sound. A few people who had doubted her on previous visits now watched with a mixture of awe and curiosity. She could feel the shift in energy as the room responded to her playing, and it gave her a sense of purpose that was almost tangible. Each note seemed to ripple through the space, connecting her to the audience in ways words never could. She chose a piece she had been practicing for weeks, one that had felt too ambitious to play in public before. But tonight seemed right. The melody was complex, full of highs and lows, moments of quiet reflection followed by surges of energy. As her fingers moved over the keys, the room transformed. Diners stopped mid-bite, servers paused in their steps, and the manager stood silently entranced. It was as if the music had created a temporary world inside the restaurant, one where only the piano and her hands mattered. She noticed a group of young adults in the corner, initially skeptical and joking among themselves. Their laughter faded as the music reached their ears. Eyes widened, mouths slightly open, they exchanged glances, and then one of them whispered, almost to themselves, how incredible it was. She smiled faintly, her focus never leaving the piano. It was moments like these that reminded her why she loved playing so much. The ability to surprise, to touch hearts, and to break through barriers that words alone could never reach. The melody shifted into a more playful tune, light and airy, and she could feel the audience responding. A few clapped along quietly, tapping their fingers on the tables, caught in the rhythm. The little boy from the previous performance was back, sitting on his mother's lap, eyes wide and unblinking. She glanced at him and gave a small, reassuring smile. He grinned back, bouncing slightly to the music, and she felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in months. As she continued, her confidence grew. The initial nerves melted away, replaced by a sense of flow as if the piano and she were a single entity. Each note carried intention and emotion, and the room seemed to respond, almost breathing with her. She realized that this was more than just a performance. It was a conversation without words, a shared moment of connection between her and everyone present. The manager walked closer, quietly observing her play. He had heard many talented musicians over the years, but there was something unique about her style. It was not just technical skill, though she had that in abundance. It was the honesty, the raw emotion, the story that each note carried. He could see the customers' reactions, their faces lighting up with surprise, delight, and admiration. The laughter that had once greeted her first request to play had completely vanished, replaced with genuine attention and appreciation. She moved into a slower, more contemplative section of the piece. The room seemed to hold its breath, each listener caught in the gentle rise and fall of the melody. She felt a small tear prick the corner of her eye, not out of sadness but from the beauty of the moment. The music had the power to transport her beyond the city streets, beyond hunger and struggle, to a place where she felt truly free and alive. It was in these moments that she understood why she had never stopped playing. Even when life was difficult, even when she felt invisible. As she reached the final notes, the melody tapered off into a soft, lingering silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, the room erupted into applause. The sound was louder and more enthusiastic than anything she had experienced before. People clapped, cheered, and some even stood, their faces filled with admiration. The manager approached once again, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and amazement. "That was incredible," he said. "Truly incredible. You didn't just play the piano. You brought the room to life." She nodded, humbled, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The applause and praise mattered, but what mattered more was the connection she had created. She had once doubted herself, feared rejection, and worried about her place in the world. But moments like this reminded her that her music had value, that her voice, though silent, could be heard through the piano. Customers approached her, thanking her for the music, asking questions, and complimenting her skill. Some shared stories of how the music reminded them of their own experiences, their own dreams. She listened quietly, smiling, feeling a growing sense of purpose. She realized that this restaurant, this piano, and these strangers were part of something larger than herself. Each time she played, she was creating small moments of joy, wonder, and inspiration that would stay with people long after the music ended. As the restaurant quieted and the lunch crowd began to leave, the manager offered her another meal. She accepted gratefully, sitting down and savoring each bite. Her body felt nourished, but more importantly, her spirit felt full. She knew that each performance, each interaction, was building something meaningful, a sense of community and connection that extended beyond food or money. After finishing her meal, she packed up her few belongings and prepared to leave. She lingered for a moment, glancing back at the piano, feeling a mix of gratitude and anticipation. She had started coming here out of necessity, out of hunger, but now she saw that her presence and her music could create real change, even in a small space like this. She stepped back onto the busy street, carrying the music, the applause, and the warmth of human connection with her. Walking through the city, she felt a quiet determination building inside her. She knew there would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, and more days when hunger and hardship would test her, but she also knew that her music was a bridge, a way to reach people, to touch hearts, and to find her place in the world. And as she moved forward, each step felt lighter, each breath fuller, and her heart more certain that she was exactly where she needed to be. A week later, she found herself standing outside the restaurant again, her heart pounding in anticipation. She had been thinking about this day all week, imagining the music she wanted to play, the pieces she wanted to share, and the faces of those who had listened before. There was a nervous excitement in her chest, the kind that made her hands tingle and her stomach flutter. She smoothed down her worn jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The restaurant was busy, filled with the clinking of dishes and the hum of conversations. A few familiar faces looked up and smiled as she entered. The manager, who had become more of a quiet supporter than a skeptic, greeted her with a nod and a small smile. "You're back," he said simply. "Go ahead, play." She thanked him softly and made her way to the piano. It was becoming almost comforting, the feel of the keys beneath her fingers, the way the bench creaked slightly as she sat. She took a moment to look around the room, noticing the mix of new faces and familiar ones. Everyone seemed to sense something special was about to happen, even if they didn't know exactly what. She began with a soft, tentative melody, letting the notes float gently through the air. Almost immediately, the room began to quiet down, conversations fading as the music took hold. She let herself sink into the rhythm, her fingers moving naturally over the keys. Each note carried a part of her story, a mixture of hope, fear, and determination. She felt the music resonate not just in the room but in her own chest, grounding her in the present. The crowd watched, some leaning forward with anticipation, others closing their eyes to fully absorb the sound. She noticed a few people whispering among themselves, clearly impressed by the skill and emotion she was putting into the performance. Even those who had been skeptical at first seemed to be caught off guard by the depth of her music. She smiled, faintly to herself, focusing on the melody rather than the attention. As she played, she could feel a shift in the energy of the room. The music seemed to stretch across the tables, connecting strangers in a way words never could. The manager watched from his spot near the counter, quietly observing the transformation taking place. He had seen many performers in his time, but there was something uniquely powerful about the way she played. It was not just technical skill, though she had that in abundance. It was the honesty and emotion that shone through every note. She moved into a more complex section of the piece, one that she had practiced for weeks but had never dared to play in public before. The notes flowed smoothly, weaving a story of struggle and triumph. She could feel the audience leaning in, captivated by the unexpected depth and beauty of her playing. A few diners who had been talking quietly at the beginning now sat in complete silence, mesmerized by the music. The little boy from her previous performances was there again, sitting on his mother's lap, eyes wide with wonder. She glanced at him and smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was moments like these that reminded her why she, continued to play. Why she persisted even when life was hard and opportunities seemed scarce. Music had the power to reach people in ways nothing else could, to touch hearts and create connections that lasted beyond the moment. The melody shifted again, moving into a section that was playful and light. She could hear faint tapping on the tables as people responded to the rhythm. The room seemed to breathe with her music, the energy rising and falling in harmony with the notes. She noticed a young woman in the corner, her eyes shining with admiration, clearly moved by the performance. She felt a sense of pride, not for herself, but for the shared experience she was creating. As she played, she let herself feel the full range of emotions the music carried. There were moments of quiet reflection, moments of gentle sadness, and moments of bright, soaring hope. Each chord was intentional, each note a bridge between her heart and the hearts of the listeners. She could feel the tension and skepticism that had once greeted her performances melting away, replaced by genuine appreciation and wonder. The manager approached quietly, watching her with a mixture of amazement and respect. He had doubted her, at first as anyone might. But now he could see that she was more than just a performer seeking a meal. She was an artist, a storyteller, and a connector of people through music. The applause that had followed her previous performances seemed to pale in comparison to the quiet awe that filled the room now. She continued playing, moving into the final section of her piece. The notes flowed with a sense of resolution, a feeling of completeness that mirrored the journey she had taken to reach this point. The audience remained silent, fully absorbed, as if they did not want to break the spell she had created. The sour music filled every corner of the restaurant, wrapping around the diners, the staff, and even the walls themselves. When the last note faded, there was a brief moment of silence as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started softly, then grew louder, more enthusiastic, until the entire restaurant was clapping and cheering. Some stood, some clapped their hands together, and a few wiped tears from their eyes. The manager came forward, a genuine smile on his face, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it again," he said simply. "You've changed this place." She nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The performance had been more than she had hoped for. It was not just about the music or the applause. It was about the connection she had forged, the emotions she had stirred, and the sense of purpose she had reclaimed. She felt lighter, more certain of herself, and more determined to continue sharing her gift. Customers approached her, offering words of praise, asking about her music, and expressing their admiration. She listened quietly, smiling and thanking each person. The simple acts of acknowledgement and appreciation filled her with a warmth she had not experienced in a long time. She realized that the restaurant, the piano, and these strangers were becoming a small but significant part of her journey. After the crowd began to thin, the manager offered her a meal once again. She accepted, sitting quietly at a table, savoring each bite. The food nourished her body, but the music she had shared nourished her soul. She reflected on how far she had come. From a nervous young woman asking for a meal to a confident performer captivating an audience with her talent and heart. As she left the restaurant and stepped back onto the busy street, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The city noises seemed less overwhelming, more like a rhythm she could move with. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew that her music was a bridge, a way to reach people, to create moments of connection, and to find her place in the world. With each step, she felt lighter, her heart fuller and her determination stronger, ready to face whatever came next, carrying her music and her courage with her into the unknown. The following afternoon, she returned to the restaurant with a sense of calm confidence. The streets were alive with the usual hustle, but for her the city had begun to feel familiar, almost like a stage waiting for her next performance. She adjusted her coat, taking a deep breath as she approached the entrance. Inside, the restaurant was warm, filled with the aroma of fresh bread and simmering dishes. A few patrons glanced her way, recognizing her from previous visits, and offered quiet smiles. The manager, busy arranging tables, looked up and nodded. There was no doubt in his eyes this time, only anticipation and trust. "Good to see you again," he said. "Go ahead and play. She thanked him and made her way to the piano, the familiar weight of the keys grounding her. She paused for a moment, allowing herself to feel the energy of the room and the presence of the people who had gathered to listen. The restaurant had become a stage, and the piano was no longer just an instrument, it was a bridge, a way to connect hearts and minds through sound. She began with a gentle, flowing melody, allowing the notes to fill the room like a soft breeze. Conversations hushed and even the waitstaff paused in their tasks, captivated by the sound. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each chord carrying a story of perseverance, hope, and quiet strength. The music was alive, resonating through the room and wrapping itself around each person present. She felt a sense of calm as she played, letting the music guide her rather than her own thoughts. The audience, a mix of familiar faces and new visitors, leaned in, drawn by the honesty and emotion in her playing. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them, while others watched her hands dance across the keys, mesmerized by the fluidity and depth of her performance. She could sense the shift in energy as the room responded. The skepticism that once lingered now replaced by wonder and appreciation. She moved into a more complex section of the piece, one that demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers glided over the keys with confidence, each note deliberate and full of intention. The melody rose and fell like a story unfolding, carrying the listeners along a journey of discovery and connection. The manager watched quietly, a mixture of admiration and surprise on his face. He had seen many performers, but there was something uniquely powerful about her ability to touch people with music alone. A young couple at one of the tables exchanged glances, their expressions softening as the music reached them. Even those who had arrived with skepticism now sat in awe, unable to look away from the young woman at the piano. She noticed the little boy from previous performances, sitting on his mother's lap, eyes wide with wonder. He smiled at her and she returned a gentle nod, feeling a warmth that went beyond words. Music, she realized, was capable of creating these small, profound connections, moments that lingered long after the notes faded. As she continued, she allowed herself to explore the full range of emotion in the piece. There were moments of quiet reflection, gentle sadness, and soaring hope. Each chord, each melody, carried intention and honesty, reaching into the hearts of the audience and creating a shared experience that transcended language and circumstance. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music was not just heard but felt, resonating with those who were listening. The manager stepped closer, observing her with a quiet respect. He had witnessed the transformation that her music brought to the room, the way it shifted attention and lifted spirits. He realized that she was not just a performer seeking a meal. She was an artist, a storyteller, and a source of inspiration. The applause that followed her earlier performances had been heartfelt, but the impact of her music now went beyond clapping and cheers. It had created a lasting impression, an emotional resonance that could not be ignored. As the piece drew to a close, she allowed the final notes to linger in the air, soft and fading, giving the audience a moment to absorb the beauty of what they had just heard. The silence was profound, a testament to the power of her playing and the attention she commanded. Then gradually the room erupted in applause, louder and more enthusiastic than any she had experienced before. People stood, clapped, and cheered, their faces alight with genuine admiration. The manager approached her, his eyes shining with pride and amazement. "That was extraordinary," he said. "You've brought something truly special here." She nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The recognition mattered, but it was the connection she had created, the emotions she had stirred, and the sense of purpose she had reclaimed that filled her with the greatest satisfaction. She had begun coming to the restaurant out of necessity, but she now understood that her presence and her music had the power to inspire and uplift, to change the atmosphere and hearts of those around her. Customers approached her, offering words of praise, asking about her music, and expressing their gratitude for the performance. She listened quietly, smiling and thanking each person, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The restaurant had become a place of transformation, not just for her but for everyone who witnessed her play. She realized that her journey was not only about survival but about touching lives, creating moments of beauty and meaning in an ordinary world. After the crowd began to thin, the manager offered her another meal. She accepted gratefully, sitting quietly at a table and savoring each bite. The food nourished her body, but the experience she had created with her music nourished her soul. She reflected on the progress she had made, the courage it had taken to ask for a meal in exchange for her talent, and the journey that had brought her here. Each performance reinforced her belief in the power of music to connect, heal, and inspire. When she left the restaurant and stepped back onto the street, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The city around her seemed alive with possibility, each street corner and alleyway holding potential for new encounters and opportunities. She knew that challenges would continue, that hunger and hardship would return, but she also knew that her music was a gift, a bridge to others, and a way to claim her place in the world. With each step, she felt lighter, stronger, and more certain that she was moving in the right direction. As she walked through the city, the memory of the applause, the smiles, and the quiet nods of recognition stayed with her. She understood that her music had value beyond herself, that it could inspire, comfort, and bring joy to others. And with that thought, she felt a sense of hope and determination that carried her forward, ready to face the next challenge, to share her talent, and to continue creating moments of connection through the universal language of music. The following morning, she woke with a quiet excitement, her mind already replaying the performances from the past week. Each visit to the restaurant had given her a deeper understanding of her own abilities and a sense of connection she had never experienced before. She dressed carefully in her simple clothes, adjusted the small bundle she always carried, and set out toward the restaurant. The city was waking up around her, the sounds of early traffic and distant conversations blending into a familiar rhythm that felt almost like an accompaniment to her thoughts. As she approached the restaurant, she noticed a few familiar faces waiting near the entrance. Some waved, others smiled, and a couple of them whispered to each other as she walked by. Inside, the restaurant was bustling with activity. The warm aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering dishes greeted her, and the manager looked up from his spot behind the counter with a nod of recognition. "You're back again," he said, his voice carrying both amusement and genuine appreciation. "Play for us today." She smiled and thanked him quietly, moving toward the piano with a calm determination. She had become more comfortable with each performance, learning to let the music flow naturally, to express herself without fear of judgment. She paused for a moment, looking around at the audience, a mix of familiar faces and new ones. She could feel the anticipation in the air, a shared excitement that made her heart beat faster. She began with a soft melodic introduction, letting the notes roll gently through the room. Conversations hushed, and diners turned their attention to her, their eyes and ears fully engaged. Her fingers moved over the keys with grace and precision, each note carefully chosen, each chord carrying emotion. The music spoke of her struggles, her hopes, and the courage she had found within herself. She felt the room responding, the energy shifting as the audience became absorbed in the sound. The little boy from previous performances was there again, sitting on his mother's lap, his eyes wide and attentive. He smiled at her as she played, and she returned the gesture with a gentle nod. She could see the parents of the boy, along with other diners, completely captivated. Even those who had doubted her at first seemed transformed by the honesty and beauty of her performance. She moved into a more complex section, the melody rising and falling with a natural ebb and flow. Her fingers danced across the keys, expressing a range of emotions: joy, sadness, hope, and longing. The room seemed to breathe with her, the music creating a shared experience that went beyond language or circumstance. She noticed subtle movements among the audience, the tapping of fingers, the gentle swaying of heads, and the occasional tear quietly wiped away. Her music was reaching them, touching something deep inside. The manager watched closely, a quiet pride evident in his eyes. He had seen many musicians, but there was something unique about her ability to captivate the room, to turn a simple meal into a transformative experience. She was no longer just a girl asking to play for food. She was an artist, a storyteller, and a connector of people. The applause that had followed previous performances was genuine, but the connection she had built now was even deeper, an emotional resonance that lingered long after the last note. She shifted the melody into a lighter, more playful section, allowing the music to dance and sparkle. The audience responded with smiles, some clapping softly along with the rhythm. The energy in the room lifted, creating a sense of shared joy and celebration. She noticed a few new faces who had come specifically to hear her play, drawn by the stories of her talent and the reactions of previous audiences. Their eyes shone with admiration, and she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing her music had reached even more hearts. As she approached the final section of the piece, she let the music flow with a sense of completeness, a gentle resolution that mirrored her own journey. Each note was intentional, carrying meaning and emotion. She could feel the audience leaning in, fully immersed, their attention and hearts connected to her performance. The restaurant had become a space where music created community, where the barriers between strangers were softened by the shared experience. When the last note faded into silence, the room held its breath for a moment. Then slowly the applause began, growing louder and more enthusiastic until the entire restaurant was clapping and cheering. Some stood, some wiped tears from their eyes, and others simply smiled, moved by the beauty and honesty of what they had just witnessed. The manager approached, his eyes shining with pride and wonder. "You've done it again," he said softly. "You've brought something extraordinary into this place. People will remember this." She nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The recognition and applause mattered, but what mattered most was the connection she had forged, the emotions she had stirred, and the sense of purpose she had reclaimed. She had come seeking a meal, but she had found something far greater, a place where her talent could be shared, appreciated, and used to touch the lives of others. Customers approached her, expressing gratitude, admiration, and curiosity about her music. She listened quietly, offering smiles and thanks, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The restaurant had become a stage not just for her music, but for the transformation of ordinary moments into something extraordinary. Each performance reinforced her belief in the power of music to connect, heal, and inspire. After the crowd had dispersed, the manager offered her a meal once more. She accepted with gratitude, sitting quietly at a table, savoring each bite while reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She realized that her music had value, that her presence mattered, and that her courage in taking a chance had opened doors she had never imagined. The simple act of asking to play for a meal had become the turning point in her life, proving that talent and determination could change the course of events. As she left the restaurant and stepped back into the streets, the city seemed alive with possibility. Each step she took carried the memory of applause, smiles, and quiet nods of recognition. She understood that challenges would continue, that hunger and hardship would return. But she also knew that her music was a bridge to others, a way to create meaning and connection in the world. The journey ahead would not always be easy, but the experiences she had gained, the connections she had forged, and the courage she had discovered within herself would guide her. She walked through the city, the sounds and movement around her blending into a rhythm that felt familiar and comforting. She carried the memory of each performance, the energy of the audience, and the satisfaction of sharing her gift. The world felt larger, more welcoming, and full of possibilities. With every step, she felt lighter, stronger, and more certain of her path. Her music, her courage, and her determination would continue to guide her, opening doors, touching hearts, and transforming ordinary moments into extraordinary experiences. By the time she reached a quiet corner of the city, she paused and looked back toward the restaurant. A sense of gratitude and accomplishment filled her. What had begun as a simple plea for a meal had become a journey of discovery, connection, and self-belief. She realized that talent, courage, and persistence could transform even the humblest beginnings into remarkable opportunities. And with a renewed sense of purpose, she continued her walk, ready to face the next challenge, to share her music with the world, and to embrace whatever came next with an open heart and unwavering spirit.